Hello and welcome to Obehi Podcast. I'm your host, Obehi A14, and I strongly believe that everyone has a story to share. Now let's get started with this episode.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. Well, we met one another virtually for the first time last week. And so we talked about some issues there. And for me, like many others in the diaspora or on the continent, spirituality is very important. And so I've been living in Italy for many years. I work at the university, I think I already said. I'm also an opera singer. And I chose, when halfway through my studies of classical music, to honor the ancestors, those that have gone on before that didn't have a voice. They were not allowed to express themselves. Those ones that created the songs in the fields, cotton fields, in the tobacco fields, in the rice fields. Those ones that were not allowed to read or write, but still were clever enough, and I believe received divine guidance to put maps when they were braiding their hair, so that people would know where to go and what to avoid. Clever enough to write escape routes inside of songs and hide them within the biblical notions that they had been taught. Clever enough to recognize the spark of the divine, even if their condition was that reduced to the level of an animal. But you see, the divine, the creator, doesn't make rubbish. And you can try to stamp out the light as much as you possibly can. But what the creator has put there, no man or beast can stamp out. And so this is something that I realize I've always known since I was a child, but central halfway through my musical studies, really.
Thank you so much for that, Angela. And now, we're going to be peeling this like an onions. No, we're going to be peeling it one layer at a time. From your own understanding, how would you give a kind of a brief description of spirituality? Let's look at it from there. Let's start from there.
Yeah, sure. What is spirituality? It is that spark that you feel inside. It doesn't come from a building. It doesn't come from your pastor or your imam or your rabbi or any of the other organizations that you may belong to. What you have is your birthright. It came to you at birth. And that is the spark of the creator, the spark of the divine. And it is for you personally to recognize that, because if you don't, you can be led anywhere and people can tell you anything. But if you are already connected to the divine inside, with your third eye, with your pineal gland, it's very difficult to be led by every wind of doctrine.
But you see now, it is beginning to get a little more interesting, in that when you talk about spirituality, a lot of people, including the Africans themselves, believe that they have no idea, that they have never known anything about spirituality, except maybe they have gone to read the Bible or the Quran. Other than this, they do not have an idea of it. Of course, when it comes to this deep issue, people don't really reflect about it. They don't really think about it to understand that even when it comes to the Abrahamic religion, that is the monotheist religion, that all these actually are coming from Africa. Really, that it have been rewritten and remodified and done in a way that it appears to be new, no? So what I'm actually driving at here now is that you were referring to the creator and the God consciousness and all sort of things like that, which are actually the fundamental, the basis of spirituality, as it were. Now, the question is, why do you think Africa, which is supposedly the root cause of humanity, the cradle of humanity, where everything started, suddenly come to accept that they have no idea of God consciousness except through other people that brought consciousness to them from the outside? Whether you are talking of Islam, talking of Christianity, why do you think that is the issue?
I think that the Africans are naturally very spiritual. If you think in the beginning, what divided each ethnic group or each nation, because we didn't have nations, they were, different sets of people, were their spirituality. There weren't any borders. There was just spirituality. And so if you believed in this way, you were this part of this group. If you believed in that way, you were that part of group. But it wasn't exclusionary. It was inclusionary. We included everyone. There wasn't such a thing as sectarianism, right? Where if you didn't believe this way, then you were a bad person. Because Africans understood that many roads lead to the divine. But what happened was, I think there was a decline. Slowly over time, there was a decline. And what crept in were, I don't know how to say it, but the disrespect. And so, as has been well documented, began to enslave themselves first. So if you would capture an enemy, what was considered an enemy, he was enslaved. But it wasn't this enslavement that we saw with the Arabs or with the Europeans. It was an enslavement with a limit, so a limited time period. And then after that, that person had to be given his freedom or her freedom, and they were also considered part of your family. So when people started capturing others and then selling them to the Arabs, that system changed. And within that, also the way to look at spirituality changed. I think that's basically where things began to decline for the African. And so if I think, for example, about the African and spirituality. He or she or they saw spirituality in everything. Have the concept of natur, right, which translates, or netter, which translates to nature. Right? The African saw the divine, God, whatever you want to call him, in everything, in the leaf, in the ground, in the trees, in the wind. It was everywhere. And when the African began to lose that concept, that's when he or she became confused. And that's when every other wind of doctrine was able to infiltrate, because the Africans began to lose their way.
I'm trying to get one thing clear here. First of all, why is it important, or what actually is the relevance of spirituality in the life of a people? To even start with, what is the relevance of spirituality in the life of a people?
Okay, well, we as a people, diaspora continent, we have always had spirituality at the center of our being. It has always been everything based on spirituality. So whether it was science, chemistry, biology, whether it was the arts, whether it was literature, whatever. Yes, we had oral traditions, but first those oral traditions were grounded in spirituality, the knowledge of the divine, and then everything was looked at from that point of view. And so, if we think of African science, first you must look at the divine, and then you can understand the science behind it, not the other way around. So, if we are to pull ourselves out of the quagmire where we have fallen, right, we have to realize that for us, spirituality is natural, it is normal, it is. blood that runs through the veins. It is like the air that you breathe, right? It's normal. It is, if you think of our pineal gland, which is in the head here, sort of in the center, sort of, right? It is the biggest of all of the races, okay? And that we call the God center. So you must understand that civilization is coming from Africa. Right, we are the ones that taught the rest of the world about civility, how to be civil, live in a civil manner, and about the doctrine, no, not doctrine, spirituality. All right, how to look at it. For example, if we think of ancient Kemet, I'm not going to call it Egypt, Kemet, because it's thousands of years old, thousands. And you see all of those God figures. They are not separate entities. They represent portions of the character of a person. So whatever that single God person thing is, it represented an aspect of the divine that was hoped to be incorporated into the person. But when the Europeans came, they didn't understand that. So they thought that the Cometians had hundreds of gods. No, it wasn't that. They were all different aspects of the divine that one should endeavor to incorporate in oneself. And so, if we are to begin to pull ourselves out of the mess that we've fallen into, it is one, to realize that we are very, very spiritual. Two, to look at everything that we do with spirituality, spiritualize. So, whether you are studying, as I said, literature or science or any other linguistics, whatever, first you must connect to the divine so that revelations can be given to you, because it wasn't that we were atheists, it wasn't that we focused on capitalism or whatever. That was also part of us, but everything first came from seeking the ancestors, the divine, the angels, and then we went forward.
Thank you so much for that. That is very important. I really wanted that kind of explanation in a way that the people should understand that what we are talking about here is not like it's strange to us. It's not like it's anything new. When we talk of spirituality, which is actually about discovering yourself as against discovering something different from yourself, no? Because
Exactly.
there are two different things. And what the regimental religion does to the people is take the power away from the people so that the people can continuously depend on this system that fuels their hope, their not really, it's not really giving them something, is holding back something from them. So that for the people to have a sense of worth, they need to depend on this regimentized ideology, as it were. Whereas spirituality gives you freedom, you find yourself inside. Now, just to add to that, why I believe that a lot of Africa should really give it a consideration of looking back, of looking inward for this sense of balance that we're talking about here. In that African spirituality does not compare you, because it's a way of life. It gives you a sense of worth that you should know what you are supposed to do, and by that it doesn't compare you to do anything. Let me give you an instance what I'm talking about here. You see, when I was much smaller, I was living with my family then in Uromi in Nigeria. And we were the first people to start going to church in our house. So in our village, in fact, there were other people that were going to church in our village, but in our house, we were the first to go. My father didn't believe in Christianity. So my father had his own way of practicing his own religion, practicing his own spirituality, not religion as it were. But it's not religion. No. But guess what happened? My father never had any problem with us. We were going to church. For him, it was not a problem. When the time comes for him to honor his ancestor, he does it. He never forced us to do it. Now I'm trying to
That's very African.
Okay. Now I'm trying to help somebody to understand something here now. That imagine that my father was a Muslim or he was a Christian. He tried to worship his own Allah or tried to worship his own Jesus. Then his children gather and say they are going to another church, they go to another denomination, and they come back. there will be war in that house. In Nigeria,
Uh-huh.
there will be children that will be killed because the children decide to go to another denomination. And this is happening in
Mm-hmm.
many other places. This is to show you that this regimental religion, like Islam and Christianity, is not really about bringing freedom to the people. They are part of the slavery system. What we are talking about here by spirituality is about freedom. It's about you being free, living in a world that is multiple of belief. All right. So now the question I'm trying to drag to here now is that when the European came to enslave Africa, of course, they came up with a lot of idea, a lot of stories, a lot of fabricated story to show that Africa do not know God, so that they needed to be forced into believing in Jesus and things like that. But what we come back to understand at the end of the day is that these are people that were highly religious, like you already pointed out, because it is obvious, because these are people that have been here for it's just impossible that they cannot be religious. They are very religious people. It is reflected in their name, it is reflected in their greeting, it is reflected in everything they do. In fact, that religious system was taken along with them to the Caribbean, to many other parts of the world, so that even today, talk of different gods in Africa, talk of different faith system in Africa. Some of them are even coming from the diaspora. Many people in Africa are ashamed to say that these have been their own religious system, their own belief system. So what I'm trying to ask you is, how important is African spirituality to the African diaspora community?
You know what's really weird? Because we weren't allowed to practice it because of, they stripped us of everything, names, spiritual belief system, right, a sense of self. We were equated also to animals. Some writers have put it in books where I think it was Toni Morrison, that there was a little young girl that was taken by the European enslaver and pirate, that's what I call them, and shown a field that was full of domestic livestock, told that she was equivalent to those domestic livestock. So imagine, even the very spark of the divine they wanted to put out, but it was impossible, because what the Creator has put there, as I said before, it is impossible to stamp out. Thank goodness he decided to put it inside and not outside. So we kept some ways the old ways of worshipping. Some things changed because of the condition where we found ourselves, and maybe we couldn't get some of those sacred religious items to use in our ceremonies. But I believe that probably the diaspora, especially those in Brazil, those in the Caribbean, kept a lot of the original ways of worshipping the before the colonial people came along. And so I believe that we can teach one another a lot, because we can bring things back that you may have forgot, and you can teach us things that we probably didn't know. I think that's what could happen, and in that way building a bridge. You see, the DNA is the DNA, and when we come back to Africa, many of us begin to weep because, of that DNA ancestral blood that runs through us, that recognizes, something that is familiar, even if 20 generations have passed. And so I believe that there's a lot that we can teach one another. And we must also remember that we're not separated. Right? One of the things that the organized religions did was to separate us, trying every way. I mean, if you think of the thousands of churches that have sprung up all over, the denomination of this and the denomination of that, all worshiping the one same God, right? But that should tell you that kind of splintering right? It's not normal, right? Because the divine is a creator of order. He is I don't want to say God because it incorporates many things that could also be considered negative. So I like to say the creator or the divine. He is or she is um, an entity of order. And if you have so much division and so many people being separated and not even knowing why, then you should stand back and ask yourself, is this normal? Is it right? Is this the way of the creator? And then the other thing we need to realize is that it's coming from within, coming from the heart center. All right. So if you're connecting with that person or that group of people, the first thing you should feel is love. If there's no love, you need to question because the creator first, right, gave us the spirit of love. That is what the human condition is. And if you don't have that, you need to ask why.
And talking of why, I think I really do need to ask why there is so much division among the okay, now we're talking about spirituality, but also we talk about religion because the regimentized religion is also very important in this case, no? And just now you made mention of the division among the religious sect. Particularly in this case, we are going to be looking at the Africans because that is where you have the biggest division among the religious faith, as it were. If you look at the European, for example, I live in Europe. In nearly all the Italians are Catholics. I'm not saying all, but nearly all are Catholic, which means that even though religion is an instrument of the state that is used, of course, to control the people, which is what it is. It has always been like that as long as it remained an organized religion, because the connection between God and man was supposed to be a direct thing. The moment there is something in between, meaning that it's a different kind of agenda, that is how the state run their things. It has been like that since Constantine and the rest, of course, have put hand in it. So those who are students of history should understand that. So, but having said that, it is not in all the cases it's always a negative thing. Sometimes it can be used to also organize the system and help to propagate the interests of the state, okay? But what I really want to point out here is that if you look among the European, whether you are talking of the Germans, the French, the English, even when the Anglican decided to break out from the Catholic Church, they didn't break out into thousands of pieces. Because if they break out into thousands of pieces, it will be difficult for them to organize themselves because the state and the religion, they are just about the same, no? They are the same thing. But when you look at the African people, the African diaspora, and the Africans at home, they are breaking it into not thousands, but millions of pieces. When you break it into millions of pieces like this, how are you going to be able to make progress? I can tell you, for instance, when I was in Nigeria, in nearly every uncompleted building, there is a new church. And all these new churches are worshiping the same Jesus. But how is it possible that there is this too much division in one God? Is it not supposed to be a God of peace or something, a God of unity, of harmony? Why is it like that? Because what I am beginning to see, even now that I'm in Europe and I'm also see the same Africa that came to Europe, they do not form like bigger bodies of church, so that they can organize themselves. It can also help them to propagate their interest as a people. Instead, it's different little pieces. In Verona, for example, where I live, there are a lot of different denominations. Where this will become become problematic is that because they are too fragmented, they cannot form a really solid body to demand for anything. Because if they were to be really organized, irrespective of whether you are a church or you are a social gathering, as long as you are a people, you organize yourself, you will be able to seek something, you'll be able to demand for it, you'll be able to get it. But as we can see, they are fragmented too much. And I'm beginning to think that this fragmentation, like you said, is not by accident. So what is the brain behind this over fragmentation of Africa within the range of religion and spirituality, if we want to call it like that? Because I think there is a source. I'm beginning to suspect that is something that is not well there.
Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to start maybe going backwards here. If you think about what is happening with our brothers and sisters, African brothers and sisters, right, we have been told that we're ugly, that our hair is kinky and not the way that it should be, right, that our bodies aren't perfect, that, the noses are too wide, the lips are too big. And so what do we do in order to emulate that white Jesus that has been given to us? We bleach our skin, we straighten our hair, we reduce the size of our noses, we try to reduce the size of our lips, and we have an English that's even more Queen's English than the Queen herself. All right? So if somebody gives you the unattainable, you can try to get it, but you'll never maybe arrive there. Now, if you think of the Catholic Church, it is a military organization, military, with the Pope at the top. All right? And then you have the cardinals, then you have the priests, and then you have the lay priests, and then you have the public. It is organized. So in order to stop all of those aberrations of 50 million types of churches, they have something that's very organized. Now, within the Catholic Church, you have different sections, so like those ones that follow Padre Pio, right? Others that follow that are called the Camilliani, that are doctors. Those are the ones that follow Mary. But they all recognize one man is a man at the top. So it is a pyramid. This is theirs. It's coming out of Europe. And because it is military, it is a military operation. And in 1491, the Pope then gave the order to go and basically claim the lands of the heathen. So claiming that land means that you could have killed all of the occupants, enslaved whoever's left, and steal all of the resources. This was 1491. All right. Even if they had Martin Luther, which became, he was Protestant, right? And they had a splintering off from the Catholic Church to the Protestants. It's still a military organization. Africa never had that bellicose inside of them, that sort of military going and conquering. I don't know that about Africa. I mean, now you have some disturbances with militaries going and killing the unarmed civilians, all of that stuff. But that has not anything to do with the churches. So without a pope, a black pope, over the churches, you're going to have millions splintering and doing their own thing. And then you also have this figure called the overseer in the black churches, which was literally an overseer, the one that would dish out the beatings. So you were only allowed to teach what the master allowed to be taught in the black churches. It was never really organized to give true spirituality. And this is what the Africans need to be able to understand. It was not. The concept of their church was to go and we were not included. We were the conquered. We were the ones being conquered. We were not the conquerors. Okay? And so if you understand that, you can understand why we have so many problems. And in the beginning, I gave that that idea of the black person trying to paint themselves white and their hair straightened, right, and the lips more thinner and the nose smaller, because we are trying to be something that we are not. It's not ours. And as long as we are not using what our divine creator gave us, then you're going to have this kind of mess within the black race, because it's not just one limited to one country or one set of people. It's the entire African.
Thank you so much for that, Angela. That is very educating and it's very, very important. Of course, a part of it is actually provocative, no? Which is the part that has to do with religion. In that sometimes when we Africans talk about religion, we don't understand the military undertone in it. In fact, at a point, I've had to tell some people during a conversation that the Bible, for example, is highly militaristic, and it need to be understood from that point of view. In fact, the words that were used in the Bible, we can't just look the other way around and not understand the meaning of blood in it. You see, the over exasperation of conquer as a term, of killing as a term, of maiming, of this God that is always blood sucking, as it were. You know, we cannot just pretend we don't hear them because somebody is over romanticizing them in our ear and we don't understand it. Because if we do really understand it, we should understand that if that book were to be acted as a film, that film will be categorized red. It will be categorized not fit for children to see in the regular cinema, as it were. But we don't know that. We seem to overlook all these things. We just think that it's peace, peace, peace. Come on, do you even read? Do you even pay attention to what you are reading? All right, now let even leave that for that, because those who created the Bible, like we will understand, they're not like illiterate and they will want us to understand. Those some fishermen who never went to school in Galilee, so they wrote the Bible. It is not true. These are highly military men of the Roman time. So anyway, we can even leave that for that. Let's look at how it can benefit us, our interest. If the Romans decided to create a Bible that will suit their interest, that is fine for them. Because it is right that every people should fight for their own interests. For us, Africans, for us as a people, now, before we even move there, let's try to understand a part of our system. If you look at a typical African setting, religion has always played, or actually, let's look at spirituality. Spirituality has always played a typical role, a very important role in the society. In that it is not just a kind of a confusing thing like that. You see, if there were a problem, say somebody wanted to make a connection between the physical and the spiritual, that is always a kind of intervention. This one is cut across all different parts of Africa, cut across all different civilizations in Africa, which means that God consciousness, like we were talking about, is something that is highly involved in the African typical setting. So if we want to find a solution, we must be able to put everything about us 360 degrees into it. That includes also our spirituality.
I think that you need to start talking to your grandfathers, their brothers, their sisters. All right. I think you need to start collecting things before colonialism, especially the spirituality. I think you need to start teaching your children that Black is beautiful and that the creator is within. It is not something external. It is not in a building, but it's that the divine is always with you. And you need to start teaching your kids and whoever, can listen, that you can stay in meditation as you're going through your day. You don't have to be in meditation just on Sunday. And then when you have a moment to relax and think about the divine, then you go and you confess your innermost the innermost secrets to a man rather than to the divine. I think that everything just needs to be rehauled, and you need to step back, go back to your roots, your original way of looking at things, seeing the divine in nature, and then taking that and putting it and coupling it with your education system. Because if you do that, that is a thing that will cause Africa to rise. We are not necessarily bellicose. We are not aggressive. We are not people that go, generally speaking, and try to take over the countries of others just because it's there for whatever reason. That's not us. Right? So we need to look at what is naturally ours. And what is naturally ours is the divine, but using it for ourselves. I mean, imagine some of the monarchs, for example, right, like the Haile Selassie that I heard, right, would command the bees. I mean, what kind of spirituality do you need to command nature to go and fight for you? Okay, not building things, right? Because the divine already made everything that we need, right? I've seen pictures where little children would sit down with leopards, hyenas, right? And they wouldn't be bitten. I mean, where is that? Where's that knowledge? This is what you guys need to be asking yourself. And this is what you need to be passing on to your children. And going and sitting down with the elderly, giving them that place of respect again, so that they can teach you the knowledge of past times, that oral tradition that seems to have been broken and lost, where it's not important, it doesn't seem important for you anymore. But you have to realize it is deadly important if we want to get out of where we are.
It is deadly important. It is deadly important. And I think you are touching actually the main conversation for today, which is having a balance, because that is what it is, having a balance. Because now it appears that we are getting life, but we are actually getting lost. This is not life as it were, no? Because you are referring to even that idea of the children playing with the leopard can only be, so you just imagine, how is it possible? Because you are going to have to grow up now. You are going to have to be able to communicate with this wild animal so that they can sort of relate with you. Now we're going to be talking a little bit about the philosophy. What is life itself? How do we manage to be able to coexist? Because if we go back again to the regimentized religion, it destroys almost everything. It stands in opposition, saying that I am the best, you are wrong, I am right. That is how it exists. Because if that is not the way it exists, Islam and Christianity will be living in peace. But it is difficult in the way it is structured to live in peace. Because one is right, the other one is wrong. Whereas in spirituality, it's not supposed to be like that. We are supposed to have a kind of a balance. No, life is supposed to be balanced. So I want to ask you a question on that. How do we, I know you have already said something towards that, no? How do we create this balance again? How do we go back to have this balance in our system, looking at African spirituality? How do we get there? Is it even possible?
That is the starting point. It's not the end. Really, that is where the strength lies. And then going from there, as I said, and going and talking to the elders and sitting down and recapturing life before colonialism. What was it? And taking the best of those teachings and incorporating them back into your lives, back into, your educational system. Because without that, Africa is not going anywhere. Right. The organized religions, they are organized for a reason. All right. right? They separate because that is their job. It is to separate. It is not to bring people together, right? And if it was to bring people together, we wouldn't have millions of denominations. It is not to bring people together. It is to keep people fighting. All right, you see, the divine is not a divine of confusion, but power, love, and a sound mind. And I don't see power, love, and a sound mind when you're fighting and at each other's throats, trying to dominate one over the other. It doesn't make any sense. And so if you start just saying, no, I don't accept this, this is not the divine, this is not what I inside intuitively know as the divine way, it's not. So if you begin to refuse that model, that is the beginning of healing. All right. And then I would also like to say this, that especially the Old Testament, it's African. It is not European. What they have done is they've cut it up and added and have subtracted pieces for their own liking, for methods of control. And this is why you have people that move towards those teachings, because at some level we recognize them because they are African. But what we need to do is find the original teachings and go by them if that is what your soul identifies with, knowing that that book has been used to subjugate and dominate, rape and pillage and steal. Okay? And caused a kind of confusion in the African mind because at some level we recognize what's inside of it because it is coming from our teachings that they have taken and put together for their own purposes. Remember that the European came into Africa and studied at least 3, 4, 500 years. All of their philosophers went to ancient Kemet to study, and they were welcomed because it was a place of learning. So the entire world was welcomed, and they were taught many things. Who would have ever imagined that they would have come back and used that knowledge to completely wipe out, right, African cultures and dominate, enslave, and colonialize?
That is the sad part of the story. It's a sad part of the story. And at the end of the day, as we correctly stand, even we believe that we are stranger to ourselves. So that is where it becomes evil more dangerous, no? Because I can understand somebody come from outside, try to take anything away from you, telling you that you owe nothing. That can be understood from that person's point of view. But from your point of view, how do we come to the point that we come to accept that we really do not own anything? Because if we accept that, then we don't fight for anything anymore. So we just give up, no? That is where it becomes more dangerous. Anyway, now, then look at you, Angela. You are a seeker, like I said before in the beginning. So you went to Africa. You had an encounter in Kenya. So share with us, because this life is about sharing. Also, in this channel, we are sharing so that we can learn from each other, because we are in a journey, sort of. And this journey is really very interesting because from day to day, we are trying to learn more. We're trying to learn how to live better. So share with us your journey to Kenya and the reconnecting to your roots, as it were.
Well, as I told you, I have been seeking for very many years, a long time. And then in 2017, I began to see a set of numbers, the same set of numbers wherever I went. I would actually even go shopping, and it still happens. And I would pay my bill, and it would be that number. I would go and start a new contract here in Italy, and I would go, for example, because I teach, and they would give me my register. So they would also give me a drawer to keep the register in, and the drawer would be that number. I would go to a particular building of another contract, and the number would be that number. So it was just everywhere. And I thought, well, there's something about this, and I want to know why I'm being pursued by this number. I don't understand. So I began to ask online, and many people said it's a lotto. And I said, it's not the lotto. If it was the lotto, I would feel that within my heart, but that's not what I feel. And so I started to speaking to Africans, from the continent online. And they told me immediately that they were sacred numbers and that I should maybe come to Africa because they couldn't tell me on the online on Facebook. And so I was actually scared because I didn't know anybody in Africa. My family, original family, was taken as into slavery to Jamaica. And so for many generations, that's where we have lived. I was born in England, but my parents, both of them, were born in Jamaica. And so it took me 1 year to pick up the courage to go because, again, I didn't know anyone. And I chose Kenya because they, like Nigeria, they speak English. And I thought, well, everyone goes to Nigeria, I'll choose another place, not realizing that I was going to be running into my destiny. And so I was taken to the seers of Mount Kenya, otherwise known as Mount Kirinyaga, otherwise known as Mount Zion. I thought, how can it be called Mount Zion? Isn't that in Israel? And so when I got there, they told me that they had been expecting me, and they threw a kind of party for me uh, uh, for my return, which I thought was really weird because I couldn't understand anything they were saying. And then they said that this is the fulfillment of prophecy. And so I was given some things to do and sent home. And then I went back so a few months later, about September or something like that. And there I was ordained as a seer of Mount Kenya, being told that this was the will of the Creator, and given the things that given my mission, so to speak, which is the mission to the diaspora, to wake them up and to tell them that it's actually time to come home and rebuild that bridge between the continent and the diaspora. Those of us that are spread around, we are 40 million in all, and so that's how my journey started. And then I began to work with the hidden seers of Mount Kenya that do prayers and sacrificial work for humanity. And there they began to tell me about the connection with Israel and Kenya. And, the name is Isolele, really. It isn't even Israel, Isolele. But that's a story for another day. So that's my story in a nutshell.
That's very interesting. So now you have got it.
Scusami, c'è qualcuno. Sorry, there's someone at the
Okay,
door.
go,
Just
go,
a
go, go,
minute.
go, go. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, we'll wait for you. Uh, it's really interesting what we are hearing from Angela now. That there is a kind of a mission that she have got, and of course, when she returned, because she's going to open the door for somebody, she's going to explain to us what this particular mission is, and how she's engaging with the diaspora community, because I think this is really the most important part of the entire story. In that, as a seeker that she is, and I think most of us are, we try to find a deeper sense of meaning to our life. If you go to maybe even in the Bible, don't you see some people sometimes they go to the mountain to pray, they seek a kind of an encounter. There they are given a mission usually, and that mission sometimes can lead them to maybe to help themselves or to help some other persons, to help their community. And even in our traditional story, we have see people in most of the cases who have maybe leave the comfort of their home, no? And they go out and they seek the face, the divine face, and they return home, and their mission become clearer to them. And this mission can sometimes lead to the salvation of an entire people. Of course, we are talking from a spiritual perspective, as it were, no? It might not be very clear to everybody, but if you are the one that have received that kind of mission, then of course it becomes clear to you. Because life is sometimes not as simple as it might appear to be. So that is why it is very important that sometimes when we hear people talk about their personal experience that might not be the same experience that you have, you need to pay attention. All right, Angela, thank you for your story.
Sorry, that's I just
All right.
I tried to ignore the phone call, and then he came and rang the bell, the chitophano. So at that point, there was no way to ignore anymore. Anyway, so I apologize.
It's okay, no problem. We all understand that this is the world that we live in today. In that, okay, everybody is jumping in, so it's okay, no problem. So what I was asking, what I was trying to explain to the audience while you were away is this mission, this spirit of a mission, it is very important, no? I think they are quite, I think they're like 4 or 5 or something like that. Why you are here, what you are here for, what is your mission, what you're supposed to do, and things like that. These are some of the things that need to be clarified for us in our life that sort of give us a sense of our living, no? Now, where I'm going to go here now is that now that you have given this mission, how are you executing it to be able to connect? So when you say you are connected to the diaspora, how are you doing that?
All right. Well, generally, I have become the mouthpiece of the hidden seers. And so if there are prophecies to be told, if there are things that were promised that were not fulfilled, especially by governments, for example, they for the independence of Kenya, the seers had done a lot of prayers and these kinds of things. And they're created by granting independence. And in order to seal that that deal, if we can say, Jomo Kenyatta, which was the president of Kenya at the time, and Haile Selassie, the king of Ethiopia, came together in Kenya and planted what is called a magumo tree, which is a sacred tree to the Creator, right, as a symbol of his faithfulness. And they promised to build a tabernacle. This was over 50 years ago, right, to the Creator Most High. That promise was never fulfilled. That land was also given to someone else, fell into the wrong hands. And so my job now is to publicize that fact and bring it back to memory, because 50 years have passed. So that's one thing. And second of all, to let the diaspora know about these promises, these prophecies that have been given.
Right. Now, I want to ask you a few more questions here before we move on, because it helped me to understand, okay, this journey, this your personal journey that I found very fascinating and quite important. Now, did you ask why you were the one chosen?
Did I ask? I think that I've always known. I didn't need to ask. I did not need to ask. It was something that was very obvious to me, because I have, since a child, had experiences recognizing the divine. And so I know that everything has a time and a season. And it is a season now for Africa to rise. And I've known that for probably since about 2010, 2011. So the divine, the Creator, chooses who has willing ears and a willing heart, faithful hands, who is willing to go that extra mile. So,
Okay, this is the last question I'm going to ask you there before we move on. Is it in this plan? Is this a prophecy that you received? Was there also a plan what the people need to do? Okay, now I'm talking of the African diaspora, but also the Africans at home. What they need to do to prepare for the change that you are
okay.
referring to here?
All right. Well, the promise was made between the heads of state. Those heads of state were and are Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, Kenya, Israel, and Egypt. These five. That they were supposed, the land was chosen, and these heads of state promised to build the tabernacle, which they refer to in the Old Testament. That's why I told you that it's African, but it has been taken and twisted around for colonial and slavery uses. So they took our own things and used it against us, as they generally do. So they have said that a lot of the calamities in the world, this is coming from the seers, are happening because that promise has not been fulfilled, the tabernacle has not been built. And so, how we can come together is publicizing this fact that this promise was made, right, for the independence of Kenya, and then also when South Africa became independent, Africa was supposed to have one constitution and one money and one flag. This was also a promise that was made and what was said that needed to be done because the order came for Africa to rise. This was in 2007. And those of our leaders, the oracles, the seers, the marable, right, those ones that, are able to watch the skies, because even the some texts in our sacred texts, let's say, we can call it the Bible, but we can call it other things, because what is the Bible but a collection of sacred texts? So within the sacred text, they speak about our sacred men and women, holy men and women, watching the stars, because each star is connected to a person. And so whether you have a big star or a little star will depend on, what your life path is supposed to be. And so it was understood that in 2007, even the Europeans saw that and knew that it was time for that order had been given. And so they have been basically trembling ever since. But the order for Africa to rise has come. And so, whether it is with brute force or whether it is with gentleness or whatever it is with, we must rise.
Okay, I accept that. That is very positive, though, that we must rise to certainly. Um, um, Now I have a problem here. The problem now is with all this suffering that is going on in Africa, this entity, this power, do they have the possibility of intervening so that the suffering can stop? Why did they have to wait till 2010 before the order had to be given for Africa to rise? And when it is said that Africa need to rise, why does he have to include Saudi Arabia in the building of the tabernacle? Anyway, there are a lot of things that are involved in it. Anyway, I don't know how you want to go to explain those parts for me, because really,
Well, you have to remember the continent of Africa is a continent. So they can call it North Africa, they can call it Saudi Arabia, whatever they want to call it. But it is the continent I'm speaking about. And the continent is one.
Mhm.
So whether you decide to divide it up and call it Timbuktu over the mountain and under the bridge, you can do that. But when the divine looks at it, it looks at the continent of Africa.
All right, that is fair enough. Now we move on. We move on to the next one, which is about the the importance of spirituality in the continent of Africa, and of course, the Africans in the diaspora. So the question actually it goes like this: why is spirituality so central to the African people? Of course, this is what we are talking about today. How to balance your life through African spirituality. So why is this so central to Africa, both at home and abroad?
I think I already answered that, but I'll answer it again. Right, that is that our whole system was based on spirituality. It is something that is innate within us. Okay, the African people are the oldest race on this planet, and before we had all of the stuff that happened to us, everything was spirituality. Our borders were based on spirituality. We didn't have walls that separated, right? We had, okay, you believe in this way and you believe in that way. And so this is where our belief system begins and this is where yours ends. That is what the borders were. And so why is it central? Because it is something that is innate within us. It is something that, it is that God spark, for lack of a better term, that we were born with. That's how it is. That's why you can go, to every country that has the diaspora, and you will see that we are very, very spiritual. It is just something that's innate. You can go to the continent and you find the same thing. Now you have to ask yourself, why? Why is that? Because that is how the Creator made us. The other races, you may not see that. They are more materialistic, right? Whether it is the Europeans or the Asians or whatever, they tend to be more materialistic. But we are the ones that carry that God spark within us.
Thank you for that. All right, so we really have touched some of the most important part of this argument today because now we have spent more than 1 hour. But that is something I really want to ask you. Of course, I'm not going to let you go. I ask you that, and it had to do with the way, the strategy, because we are saying how to sort of find balance. Because if you don't have balance, if you just like jumping from what you don't know, of course, then it becomes really challenging for you. And now we're talking of how to find balance through African spirituality. So what I want to ask you is, what would be your recommendation for somebody? Because you as a seeker, you have a set before you can find them, and some other person might also be seeking or maybe looking for a way to find balance through African spirituality. So what would you recommend to such a person? Maybe 3 things the person can do. I don't know, 2 things or the person can do. So from your personal experience, what would you recommend to such a person? This is toward the end of the, yeah.
First, to understand your own divine spark within inside. That's the first thing, right? So it's through meditation, through prayers, through whatever. But first, understand the spark of the divine within. And then from there, your third eye will begin to open, that other part of the spirituality that you can't see with the natural eyes. And then that will guide you. So whether you call them angels, whether you call them ancestors, whatever you call them, guides, you will be guided. But the first part is to seek that spirituality within.
Thank you very much for that, Angela. I really do appreciate that. I really do appreciate it a lot, because it's a long journey. It's a long journey to be able to move from what might be a kind of a bubble in our life to get into a stability, to get into a balance, and a balance using an African belief system. So this is something I really appreciate a lot in your personal journey. You move from Europe to Kenya and to find a peace, because that is what we are all looking for at the end of the day, And so also what we recommend to the people, to our viewer now, is for them to first of all realize, because that realization is very important, because if you don't even know why you are doing what you are doing, then it becomes more challenging for you. So I really want to thank you for the time that you have spent with us explaining your personal journey, because it is through your personal journey that we are able to connect with you. So I don't know if you want to say anything to conclude the podcast, because we have really, I've asked you all the questions that I wanted to ask you in respect to this conversation. and you have been very generous in explaining to us, including your personal journey to Kenya and all that. Is there anything else you would like to say to conclude the conversation? I really do appreciate your time.
Seek first the kingdom of the divine, which is inside, and then everything else will be added onto you. That is my advice. Okay. Seek first. So it's not within the church building. It's not within the mosque. It's not within the synagogue. It is first inside. And then if you seek that inside and then you connect with that divine, then it will be much harder for people to deceive you, right? And you'll be able to see truth and light from dark and deception.
Thank you very much for that. All right, like Angela have said, you need to seek first what is inside you. In fact, you don't need to look outside, you need to look inside, because like we have been saying throughout this conversation, the regimental religion take you away to look somewhere for a solution. So here now, you need to look inward, because the source actually is inside you. If you can look inward, then you might be able to find what you are looking for.
If you enjoy this podcast, make sure you subscribe so you never miss any of our future episodes. Rate and review Obehi Podcast and share with your friends who might need it. I remain Obehi Ewafo. Thank you so much for listening, and talk to you in the next episode.